This woman got married 19 times. At least 13 of her husbands died. And when police finally arrested her, she said she couldn't even remember the exact number. This is the story of how one woman turned marriage into a killing business. In 1985, in a small community in Iran, an 18-year-old girl named Kulthum was sold into marriage. Her family was living in poverty. There wasn't enough money, not enough stability. And in their eyes, marrying her off to an older man wasn't cruelty. It was survival. The man she married was much older than her. He was controlling, abusive, the kind of husband who believed a young wife should be silent, obedient, and grateful. By her early 20s, that marriage had already collapsed. But the second one wasn't any better. Again, an older man. Again, abuse. Again, power imbalance. By the year 2000, Kulthum was around 33 years old and had already lived through two marriages that were defined by violence, humiliation, and dependence. If you look at her story from the outside, you can see the shift happening. At first, she was the powerless one. Then she decided she would never be powerless again. Somewhere between resentment and survival, a new idea formed. If older men wanted young wives, if marriage came with dowry payments, if inheritance could legally transfer to a spouse, then maybe marriage wasn't a trap. Maybe it was an opportunity. Kulthum began attending local women's social and religious gatherings, the kind where families quietly network, make introductions, and discuss potential matches. She presented herself as modest, polite, recently divorced, looking for companionship, and the women there trusted her. They introduced her to elderly men who were lonely, widowers, retired fathers, some of them wealthy, some of them comfortable enough to provide security. Before agreeing to anything, Kulthum did something calculated. She investigated their finances. She made sure they owned property, savings, assets. And when she agreed to marry, she required one thing: a substantial dowry. In many traditional marriages, a dowry is a financial gift from the groom to the bride, sometimes cash, sometimes land or property, paid at the time of marriage. To these men, it was a fair trade. They believed they were gaining a devoted wife who would care for them in old age. They had no idea they were financing their own deaths. Shortly after each wedding, Kulthum would begin phase two. She gathered prescription medications, blood pressure drugs, diabetes medications, sedatives, and slowly mixed high doses into their tea and meals. The men were already elderly, already on medication, already vulnerable. When they began to feel weak or ill, no one questioned it. Old age explains a lot. When their condition worsened, Kulthum would rush them to the hospital, playing the role of the concerned wife. This wasn't panic. It was strategy. Each hospital visit created a medical record, a documented history of declining health, a paper trail that made their eventual deaths appear natural. After discharge, the cycle continued. More medication, more weakness, more hospital trips, until eventually, death. And when it came, it looked ordinary. A grieving widow, an elderly man with health complications, a quiet funeral. Then the dowry and inheritance would be transferred, often placed in her daughter's name, so Kulthum herself wouldn't appear suddenly wealthy. After a short period of mourning, she would return to the gatherings, and the process would begin again. Over the next 2 decades, Kulthum refined her system. Marriage, poison, hospital, death, inheritance, move towns, repeat. She didn't stay in one area long enough for suspicion to build. She moved across regions in Iran, hopping from community to community, so that no single town could connect the pattern. 19 marriages in total, at least 13 confirmed deaths, possibly more. Some husbands died within months. In 2013, she married a 69-year-old man. He was dead a month later. In 2016, she married a 62-year-old, dead within months. Another husband, 83 years old, survived only 43 days after the wedding. When poison worked slowly, she adjusted the dose. When poison worked too slowly, she sometimes didn't wait. Authorities later learned that in certain cases, she allegedly smothered her husbands with a pillow or towel to finish what the medication had started. This wasn't random violence. It was controlled, targeted, financial, and disturbingly efficient. Each death appeared medically explainable. Each marriage looked legitimate. Each funeral looked tragic but ordinary. And with every inheritance, her wealth quietly grew. But something interesting happened over time. She became confident, too confident. By 2020, Kulthum was around 51 years old and married to a man named Masi. Like the others, he was older. Like the others, he had assets. Like the others, he trusted her. One day, she allegedly spiked his drink, but this time, something was different. Masi felt the symptoms almost immediately. Instead of dismissing it as illness, he confronted her. "What are you trying to give me?" He didn't brush it off. He didn't go quietly to bed. He didn't wait for the hospital. He threw her out. Divorced her. For reasons that remain unclear, he didn't report her to police. Perhaps he lacked proof. Perhaps he didn't want scandal. But the system cracked. For the first time, one of her targets survived. Most people would take that as a warning. Kulthum took it as a delay. She went back to searching. Because at this point, marriage wasn't emotional, it wasn't cultural, it was business, and business was still profitable. In 2023, Kulthum married again, this time to an 82-year-old man named Ghulam Raza. Wealthy, elderly, living alone, exactly her type. As before the process allegedly began, medication mixed into tea, gradual illness, decline. But this time, when Ghulam Raza died, his family didn't accept it. They were suspicious. Too many details didn't sit right. Around the same time, Ghulam's son happened to speak with a friend, whose father was none other than Masi, the man who had previously divorced Kulthum after suspecting poisoning. The coincidence was shocking. Two families, same woman, same pattern. One dead, one narrowly surviving. That conversation triggered everything. Police began investigating. They traced her marriages. They traced the deaths. They traced hospital visits and medical records. What initially looked like isolated cases began to look like a pattern stretching back decades across Iran. Eventually, authorities arrested her. During interrogation, she confessed to killing somewhere between 13 and 15 husbands. She reportedly admitted she wasn't even sure of the exact number. 19 marriages, at least 13 deaths. In court in 2025, she was convicted and sentenced to multiple death penalties, effectively 10 death sentences under Iranian law. The girl who had once been sold into marriage at 18 had spent nearly 4 decades turning that same institution into a weapon.